Hey guys, welcome to another MapleStory video, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the strongest class of each type. So I'm already expecting a lot of flame in the chat. Strongest warrior, mage, archer, thief, and pirate as of right now, and then I'll be explaining why they're superior to the other classes in their branch. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible and consider all the contingencies, but as you know, these can be subject to change with future classes being introduced, rebalancing, all that junk. So grab your torches, your pitchforks, your cotton candy, and watch the rest of the video as I say to your face that your main is not the strongest class. I'm just kidding. I already made a 5 worst classes video last year, but apart from those, I would say every class is pretty much viable. Heck, even the worst classes are viable, just less viable than the others, I guess. But yeah, don't let this video ruin your perceptions of every class, because in the end, it's not so much the class that matters in Maple, since, well, 1, it's a PvE game, so classes aren't really competing with each other, and 2, your equipment and stats matter way more than the class you're playing. It's not like a 20k stat Pathfinder can beat a 40k stat JETT. I don't care who you are. One other thing, I'm referencing recent DPS charts, but you really should learn to take those with a grain of salt because DPS charts only apply in extremely ideal circumstances since there are seldom any ideal situations in the game, if any. But still worth looking at if you want to, so I'll leave it in the description below. Exposition out of the way, let's get right on into the video. If you enjoyed, a rating would be much appreciated, and leave your thoughts in the comment section below on why you agree or more likely disagree with my choices, and if you want to present a good case for why you think X class is better than Y. A lot of people give blasters flack for being an extremely powerful but almost unplayable class because of how much kill pressure, mobbing, combo ability, and brute strength they have that's locked behind a paywall and the need for a thin switch mechanical keyboard with cherry keys, or whatever is easier to press. But hey, they're really satisfying to play. When most players saw blasters, including myself, we thought it was supposed to be a pirate class since its class portrait didn't look like a warrior and had an arm cannon gauntlet similar to like a knuckle, but nope, it's actually a warrior. From its conception in 2016 to now, blasters have been both the reigning king of warriors and also the underdog, as they're probably one of the least played warriors in the game besides maybe Mihail. Blasters fit the bruiser archetype, being a mid-range with close quarters fighter that focuses on chaining movement commands with their main attacks to animation cancel for streams of damage, and true to their class type, they've got all the bulk and defense of warriors, just not to their fullest extent. Warriors are often met with 3 common weaknesses: low mobility, at least compared to the other classes since we all have flash jumps these days, slower attack speed in favor of more power, and their lack of long-term DPS since warriors generally have brief periods where they turn into a tractor and plow everything in their way, and then periods where they're just not as good. Examples of this being Dark Knight's main uptime being during Sacrifice, Demon Slayer with Blue Blood, and Demon Awakening or Aaron's with Adrenaline Rush. That's not to say they're useless when those aren't active, but their uptime is not as effective outside of it. Blasters on the other hand are a speed-based warrior that they don't have high numbers as their counterparts, but they neutralize those 3 weaknesses quite well, since blasters have some of the best mobility in the game, with detonate, bobbing, weaving, muzzle flash, and other attacks that propel them upwards, forwards, or backwards. They're also the most consistent warrior in the game, provided you have the mechanics for it, since they can always maintain high DPS uptime with or without their fit job skills, so it's not an utmost priority to wait for your burst to be ready when binding a boss per se. If we look at the other side of the coin though, blasters have their own slew of weaknesses, with the 2 major ones I see being 1, their lack of front-loaded damage mitigation and or avoidance. Most warriors, they have some form of resilience in their kit such as damage reduction, invincibility, or otherwise. Blast Shield and Vitality Shield are the only 2 defensive skills Blaster has, and before that's all they needed because they can face tank 1-hit KO attacks by converting a portion of that into a shield, but it got nerfed to where it can no longer fully tank 100% max HP damage attacks as far as I can tell. Blasters are still tough to kill though, no mistake, but they're not as durable as their fellow warriors. That's not really too big of an issue these days, but it is notable to point out. The real problem with blasters lies in the core of their class. They are the hardest class to play in the entire game. Blasters require the highest amount of skill micromanagement and execution, period. More than zeros, more than arcs, more than Kinesis, etc. There's a reason why they're called the finger-destroying class. In my view, Blaster is the strongest warrior in the game, but hardly anyone wants to play it for how demanding it is. I don't blame them. But anyone who does decide to main Blaster, you guys are going to be rewarded handsomely for your commitment. Hopefully. Nexon has a tendency to want to nerf every single mage class for no particular reason whatsoever. I can't count how many times they've gutted the likes of Ice Lightning, Fire Poison, Luminous, Blaze Wizard, Evan, like every single mage in the game, except Kinesis. And since then, Kinesis has been a pretty sleeper OP class in my opinion. Players aren't too big a fan of its weird playstyle, but it can definitely speak for its strengths and power. As their name implies, Kinesis' whole shtick is that they're telekinetics that grab material objects and throw them at stuff, essentially. But they do a pretty good job at it. Kinesis boasts a bunch of different tools that can be good for mobbing, bossing, mobility, utility, and a bunch of good passes that can help them do just that. They don't receive a teleport as their main mobility skill, as they instead receive a double directional flash jump, which some people argue is a crappy one since their travel distance isn't fantastic, but being able to alternate between double horizontal, double vertical, or any combination in between is helpful for versatility since teleports lack substantial range in favor for instantaneous transport. Kinesis' strong points aren't actually from single targets so much as mobbing. They have some of the best map clearing for mages given that almost all of their psychic attacks have incredible range and wave clears such as Trainwreck, Psychic Clutch, Mental Tempest, Psychic Shockwave, Mindquake, and others, which arguably puts them higher than Luminous and Ice Lightning for mobbing. Most of the time, mages are a staple choice in any party because they meld in equal parts damage and utility, and while Kinesis do have in-fight utility, they focus more on debuffing enemy targets instead of buffing allies, with defense reduction and binds, so they're more aggressive. Kinesis can also dispel enemy buffs, so if you run into any bosses with things like damage reflect and the like, you can remove them without any problem. Being strong all across the board comes with a few weaknesses that's inherent in the class's design, similar to Blaster in that Kinesis is resource limited. Psychic points do not regenerate as freely as the likes of other non-mana resources like Demon and Time Force, so there might be brief periods of uptime disruption while you wait to recharge your PP. Additionally, while their bossing is respectable, it's under the condition that they remain still, as most of Kinesis' big attacks are locked position based, so if you come across enemies that enjoy moving all over the map, Kinesis will greatly suffer from loss of DPS. Also, they're one of the slower classes in Maple since they prefer to hit really hard instead of hitting fast, which is unlike most other mages that focus on speed. I actually highly recommend any prospective mage mains to give Kinesis a try since they're a very underrepresented class. Now for Thieves, I think you guys might be surprised to see this one because they haven't been anywhere near the strongest thief for over 4 years after they were first reworked back in 2014. But with the small buffs they've been getting here and there along with a ton of good fit job bonuses, they're slowly rising in power to be one of the strongest thieves in the game, if not the strongest. Nightwalkers are a variation of Nightlords that have a more mobile and flexible playstyle in exchange for more egregious weaknesses. The way I like to see it is that Nightwalkers are Nightlords that have both their strengths and weaknesses amplified, but that means they can be a lot more fun to play and more rewarding as a result. Nightwalkers are at their strongest when against bosses, having far more mobility than Nightlords to start with, a higher vertical jump, and 2 instant reposition abilities, albeit one of them being on a relatively sizable cooldown. Their non-burst DPS is one of the best in the game since they have the ability to animation cancel their main attack, which allows them to attack significantly faster, making them more consistent in long fights than a majority of the cast. And despite being a throwing star class who are notorious for being squishy, Nightwalkers have a few tools to keep them from being wasted, such as a passive revive every 30 minutes, long cooldown but it basically means a free extra life in bosses, that along with Shadow Bats granting them partial lifesteal to not have to be totally reliant on potions during a fight. A far cry from what it used to be, healing off of a percentage of the damage you dealt, but any lifesteal is better than none. Combine these attributes all together and you have one of the best bossing classes in the game. They had a reputation as a one-trick pony, being really good at one thing and only one thing. When they first came out, they were known as the Primo Bossers, having DPS like no other, but as trade-off they had some of the worst mobbing in the game, with only a third job skill as their main AoE attack. But after the recent fit job skills they got and enhancements to their Shadow Bats, Nightwalkers are actually contenders for being one of the best mobbers in the game. Unlike Nightlord's Mark, Shadow Bats can connect multiple times from one target to another, just at the cost of being slower. But if you have spawn enhancers like Frenzy Totem or Kishin, the bats can continue ricocheting off each other and clearing maps very quickly. Although it does require more execution than Nightlord, so I will argue that Nightlords still have a better edge. It's really hard to determine which is stronger, Nightlord with Spread Throw or Nightwalker with Shadow Servants, because both of them are capable of soloing Lucid Third Phase by themselves, but I think Nightwalker is starting to slowly become the superior throwing star class because they keep getting buffs while Nightlord is getting nerfed again and again. And when it comes to bossing, there are very few classes that can meet both the reliability and speed and power of Nightwalkers, so they get the spot for the best thief. Y'all knew it was coming. Pathfinder, broken. Everything about them, broken. Pathfinder is the best class in the game. Insane damage, insane attack speed, insane mobbing, insane mobility, insane everything. But all the extraneous praise aside, Pathfinder is quickly taking archers by storm, having almost all of the strengths of archers amplified tenfold and eliminating almost all of their weaknesses. Most newer classes like Kadena, Arc, Ilium, Blaster, and Pathfinder are heavily based on combo attacks. They string multiple skills together to fully maximize DPS. Pathfinder is one of the more mellow ones as they do have a few combos but still focus on using like 1 or 2 of the same skills overall, but they do it well. Archers are at their strongest from afar. They deal a ton of damage while kiting enemies back just like Nightwalkers, and they're much stronger when it comes to long-term DPS thanks to their trademark Hurricane skills. But Pathfinders are almost the exact opposite, being a short to mid-range burst damage carry. The moment you see a class with some kind of gauge, it's a no-brainer to expect their main damage combos to be based on that gauge, and pretty much that's about it. Pathfinder has two different forces, Cardinal and Ancient Force. TLDR version is that the Cardinal Force abilities charge up your Ancient Force abilities, which can then be modified based on the Cardinal attacks you use, which makes for a pretty fun and diverse playstyle since Deluge, Burst, and Torrent are used for different purposes. In spite of them being a mid to short range burst class, they are currently the best mobber in the game. Maybe not the best bosser because I still think Angelic Buster and Blaster still win, but with mobbing absolutely. Most of Pathfinder's attacks have ridiculous horizontal and vertical range, which allows them to cover huge areas along with their after attack Bountiful Deluge behaving the same way as Shadow Bats, Nightlord's Mark, or Wind Archer's Trifling Wind, allowing you to clear maps instantly with a few button presses and take it from a guy who trained from 240 to 250 as a Nightlord just pressing jump and showdown. Pathfinder is even easier. Also, they're the first archer class since Marksman to not have a Hurricane type skill, and don't tell me that Ancient Astra is 1 because it's a hyper skill with a cooldown, so it doesn't count. But they don't need a Hurricane skill because Pathfinder is all about chaining attacks together, such as Obsidian Barrier, Raven Tempest, Ancient Astra, and the Cardinal skills, which possibly outpace that of the Hurricane skills. Additionally, most Hurricane abilities have low damage to balance out the speed of attacks. Pathfinders on the other hand have insanely high damage, what with their strongest attacking skill being able to dish out 10,000% true damage, highest of any skill in the entire game. Now onto the weaknesses, because Pathfinders do have some, but not many, the only important one being their lack of power stance without Mihail Link, and that they're still an archer class so they're quite squishy. But both of those are negligible, especially for late game players when every boss one-shots you anyway. In fact, I dare say, Pathfinder is the first class in Maple that has no actual weakness right now, they're just that good. Well, you could argue they don't write home about their supportive capabilities, but when you got coverage like Pathfinder, you don't need it. Right now, they're just an incredibly overtuned class, and many in the community are saying they're gonna get ninja nerfs soon, but the class's kit and concept is so powerful that even if they lower the damage, Pathfinders will still be top tier because the very nature of their skills is where their strength comes from, not so much the damage. And like I said before, gear and equipment are more important for getting damage than the actual class itself. I wonder why the strongest class of each type seems to be a super combo heavy class that also happens to be a class no one really likes to play, which is unfortunate. Well, except for maybe Pathfinder, but we already talked about how they're pretty much overpowered. The king, or rather queen of pirate classes go to Angelic Buster, the only gender exclusive class in the game, and also the most out of place class in the game. Everyone else's lore has some kind of edgy or serious concept to them, whereas ABs are just like a pink polymerization of Hatsune Miku and Mega Man. But we're not talking about class design, we're talking about the skills and strength. Angelic Busters have no resource bar, instead using a resource management system called Recharge. Almost all of AB's skills have an internal cooldown in them that makes it so they cannot be activated unless recharged, and each attack you use has a chance to recharge all of your skills. Pretty neat mechanic once you get the hang of it. Arguably one of the 5 least played classes in MapleStory, Angelic Busters are insane. Upon first release, they were unmatched since they were the only class in the game that can go beyond the damage cap back when it was only 1 mil. Then in between 2013 to 2017, when the damage cap was 50, they were strong, just not quite powerful because of their lack of attack speed. But once 5th Job came out and the damage cap changed to 10 billion, Angelic Busters have reached the top of the ladder for more than a year at this point. Cast aside her appearance for a moment and you have the hardest hitter in MapleStory's history. All of her main skills have damage ratios eclipsing over 1,000. She has terrific mobbing and above average single target damage and has great innate damage passives. Initially, her usability might be hindered by the need to recharge her attacks so she can't just spam them over and over, which is what balanced out her ridiculous damage back in the day. But with the 5th Job granting new skills and buffs to her abilities, recharging at this point is a non-issue as she can easily keep 100% uptime. Her original last weakness being her slow attack speed was also pretty much remedied since they added more lines to her attacks. But if Angelic Buster was this powerful, then everyone else would play her, right? Here's where her weaknesses come in though. Pirate classes aren't famous for their supportive capabilities, and ABs are a pirate class, although her appearance might suggest otherwise. She does come with an incredibly powerful debuff in the form of Finale Ribbon, which causes you and party members to deal a much more increased damage for a period of time. Helpful, but only for more damage. Not much else to say about her defensive capabilities, and not just to her party. Like the other 4 classes in this video, she's very squishy, having low HP for melee classes and lacking reliable self-peel. Power Transfer does provide her a cushion to tank attacks, but that's all she has. Everything else is dependent on dodging attacks or external sources. AB's lack of instant repositioning, avoidability, lifesteal, and her only invincibility frames being locked behind a 5th Job skill, I think, which does last for 10 seconds but has a high cooldown and isn't readily available on demand. They kind of have similar weaknesses to Blasters in that regard. Lastly, while her single target damage is great and her mobbing is also no joke, she suffers from the contingency that you can only do one of those at a time, not so much both. When dealing with multiple high HP targets such as Mulong Dojo or Lucid, her speed might take a hit. Other than that though, if you like a pink and bubbly class with explosive abilities and high damage output, you might want to give her a try, although her playstyle and appearance is somewhat of an acquired taste. And that's it guys, the strongest class of each type. Partly from my opinion, but naturally it's subject to change if and when Nexon does class rebalancing, probably when the Glory update comes out with the new class. Hope you guys enjoyed watching, and if you think a different class belongs at the top of their food chain, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Please be sure to leave a rating, and if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys again soon in the next video. Take care.